Grand Prix show jumping is not for the faint of heart, and in today's show, you'll meet...
Great. This is Unbridled with Susan Kayne at Hits on the Hudson in Saugerties, New York. Presented by Thoroughbred. Family-owned and operated since 1949. Thoroughbred produces specially designed horseshoes, racing plates, and therapeutic products to enhance equine performance. Learn more at thoroughbredinc.com.
Winning the Grand Prix at Aachen twice is a feat reserved for the equestrian elite. Hi, I'm Susan Kayne. On today's show, meet Olympic show jumping star Neal Shapiro. Well, I'm so excited. I have caught up with the single most influential teacher of my entire life, Neal Shapiro, an amazing horseman, Olympic medalist twice, won the Grand Prix of Aachen twice, Show Jumping Hall of Fame 2010, and somehow fit in 20 years of harness training?
Well, closer to 30 years.
30 years. How did you do it?
I kept busy. I didn't stop. I just kept right on going.
How did you start in horses?
I always liked horses. I mean, from the time I was a little kid, I was just crazy about horses. And talked my parents into just going to ride. We would go to back then it would be just like a hack stable, and every weekend we would go for a hack. And if the weather was bad and I couldn't go, life was miserable for my parents for the next week. And hopefully the weekend would be okay, but that's how it all started. Did
you come from a horsey family?
Not really. Not really.
How did it evolve in you? Did you see horses or read a book or?
No, I think if memory serves me right, we were on a family vacation. I was maybe 6 or 7 years old, and we went to California, and we happened to be driving through Indio. And they have the big fair there. It was like maybe, it was sometime in the winter, I don't even remember. And we stopped by there and I watched the horse show and I said, this is what I want to do. And I think it all started from that, because it was after that we were going to the stable. I was like 7, 8 years old, and we started to ride on the weekends.
And at what point did you start competing?
Well, the first time I did any kind of competition, I was probably 11 or 12 years old. Wasn't very good, I fell off.
Were you very competitive from the get-go?
Oh yeah, very competitive.
And at what point did you start to realize you really wanted to do this as a career or as a business and start to formalize your training?
Hard to say, because my early, you never thought that, it was going to lead to anything like this, and to make a career out of it. I never thought that would happen. I never thought I was going to make the U.S. team. But things worked out. Everything kind of fell into place, and I was just very lucky.
What gave you the gumption to try for the team?
Well, that's kind of a funny story. I had done well pretty much on my own up until in the early 60s. Started going to horse shows, and I would always want to go to something bigger and better. I would strive for a certain level, kind of reach the level, and I said, I've got to do something better. I want to go on. And I just kept going on, and fortunately my parents really supported it, and they allowed me to do it and gave me the wherewithal to do it. We would get, my father would love to just buy horses, and every chance I got, I would be on riding and go to a horse show, and I won. I would just be lucky enough to win at the horse show, and we'd go on to the next level, and it didn't take long, and I was successful.
During that time period, who were your favorite horses?
Oh God, anything that could jump.
What horses helped you grow?
Uncle Max, for sure. It was a horse that initially came out of the Cowtown Rodeo. He was a saddle bronc and had this fabulous jump in him, and the man that was taking care of the horses at home, his name was Jack Ammon, was a Long Island professional. He spotted the horse, bought the horse without my father's knowledge. The horse was delivered, and And he had done a trade with my father's trail horse, his riding horse. And, Jack Ammon was a Long Island professional. He spotted Uncle Max, bought the horse without my father's knowledge. The horse was delivered, and he had done a trade with my father's trail horse, his riding horse, and plus a couple of dollars. And the horse turned out to be Green Jumper of the Year, Horse of the Year. That was in 1961. And at the end of the season, I won a major class at Madison Square Garden with the horse on Saturday night. I won the PHA finals. The next year, I had another horse, was definitely not as talented as Uncle Max, but he was Green Jumper Horse of the Year in the United States. Uncle Max went on to win a lot of major classes at the time. I don't remember if he was Horse of the Year or in that league. And then the next couple of years, it just got more and more horses. A mare called Cameo. I won a big class. I won the Revlon Trophy with her at Madison Square Garden, 1963. In 64, it was the year that the Olympics in Tokyo, and I had a phone call, and they was asked if I was going to go to the Olympic trials, and I thought, well, not really. I said, I don't belong at the Olympic trials, but you should go. You should try to go. So I asked a few questions like, what do I have to do to, what are the trials? And it's 4 days, and the first day they watch you, they observe you riding, just flatting your horse. The next day is a dressage test. You have to ride a dressage test. Then you have to, the third day was gymnastics, and the fourth day was to jump a modified Grand Prix course. Well, the two horses that I had, Uncle Max and a horse called Jacks Are Better that we ended up having, neither one of them, Uncle Max was not a horse that you could work on the flat. Jacks Are Better had a very funny gait, so dressage was kind of out of the question. The gymnastics, Uncle Max would have just smashed all the gymnastics. Jacks might have been okay, but he had never done any of that stuff. So I thought, well, maybe I can just show up on the last day where I could jump. They said, no, you needed to have to complete all the elements of the trials. And some local people were very kind. They heard about it, and a few phone calls were made, and I was loaned a horse to go with. It was a young hunter that lady nearby had, and she came over and she explained to me what you have to do, because I had no idea what dressage was. Gymnastics were out of the question. I didn't know anything about the gymnastics.
I'm glad I have this on tape now.
And so I got through, and I wound up getting selected as as an alternate, because the team was going to be in Tokyo. The heart of the team, there's six riders were going to go to Europe, and from those 6 riders that went to Europe, 4 would be selected to go to Tokyo. The other 2 would come back, do the indoor circuit, do the fall circuit, and meet the 2 young riders that were selected through the trials. So that's how it all started. And at the first horse show at Harrisburg, I believe I won 3 classes. I just missed being leading international rider, and I had a pretty successful show at Harrisburg. And during the games, Mary Chapeau's horse Tomboy had gotten injured, and so that she was pretty much without a horse for the Garden, for the National Horse Show, and they asked me, could I fill in for her, take that spot. And I had my jumpers, Uncle Max and Jacks Are Better, were entered at the Garden. And in those days, it was hard to get entries back, and it was, anything like that. And Uncle Max was actually needed to compete at the Garden to be PHA champion. So we had talked to a professional, and he agreed to ride the horse for me, and I rode on the team.
Wow, what an exciting story.
Yeah, that's how it all started.
Now, at what point did the more formalized training come in, and Bert Denemeth enter the picture?
In the winter of '64, after the indoor circuit, Bert Denemeth called and asked if I would be able to come and spend the winter at Gladstone in a training session where they were developing riders. And they had selected a bunch of young riders from around the country, and we all appeared at Gladstone, and we started training, and that's where it all started.
What was that experience like?
It was something very, very unique. First of all, I had never had any formal training up until that point. And when I got there, I realized that how I did what I did was beyond my comprehension. And I realized I knew nothing about riding, knew nothing about the training of horses. Whatever I did was just pure luck.
Well, it had to be more than luck. I mean, when you think back now and recollect, how did you do what you did without the training? That's the million-dollar question.
I don't know. One thing I was brave, maybe more foolish than brave, but I just went ahead and did it, and it just didn't matter. I just was going to go. As long as, if I could get the horse near the jump, we'd get to the other side somehow.
Did you find once you started training with Bert Denemeth that things that he put into a formal context that you actually did know and do intuitively?
No.
Did you find once you started training with Bert Denemeth that things that he put into a formal context that you actually did know and do intuitively?
No.
Not at all?
Not at all. For the first year and a half, I was lost. I tried to learn the classic way of riding. Mm-hmm. And I had a really hard time for about a year and a half. A really hard time.
And at that time, were you still riding Uncle Max and Jack Cervetter?
Yes. Uncle Max and Jack Cervetter were both invited to come to Gladstone as part of the training process. And Bert was going to rearrange them in a more classical, more formal way. Uncle Max was a very difficult horse, and Bert had a lot of success with horses like that. I guess Nautical being one that was on the team earlier. Maybe a little bit of possibly a similar background. And Bert spent the entire winter lunging Uncle Max, and working with him, doing everything on the lunge line, trying to change his attitude. Until the day that Bert decided that Uncle Max was ready to be ridden, and he was going to be the one to ride him. Well, he got lunged that morning. He got worked. The afternoon after our lunch, we went down to the indoor ring and got the horse ready and brought him down. And when Bert got on him, he kind of like put his leg on, and Max took like 3 leaps across the ring.
Oh, goodness.
Bert finally got him pulled up, jumped off, and said, "Just this horse is not going to be changed." And Uncle Max was not welcome at Gladstone any longer.
Dear. Oh,
but Jack Cervetter was.
Well, as you learned and tweaked your own riding under Bert's tutelage,
right.
Did you apply any of that to Uncle Max or Jack's as you
I tried.
then
Yes.
rode them and kind of find a happy medium?
Well, yeah, Jack Cervetter did change drastically. Was always a very talented horse, a very brave horse, a real trier. And that in the summer of '66, I was invited to come to and do the European tour with the team. Jack Cervetter came with me, and we won the Grand Prix of Aachen. So that worked out pretty well.
It worked out very, very
Yeah.
well, very well. And your Olympic mount was Snoopy in 1972. How did that joining come about?
Well, Snoopy has quite an interesting story too. He was a horse that was bought at an auction, I believe in Maryland. He was ruled off the racetrack as a 2-year-old because the story was that he ran off. He had a real attitude. He ran off with an exercise rider, went through a fence, and the rider fell off and was killed. The horse was ruled off the racetrack, went through an auction, was purchased at the auction by some people for like not a lot of money. It was under $2,000. And when the people were trying to load him on their trailer to take him home, they couldn't. He would not get on the trailer. And Tiff Traurig, Bernie Traurig's ex-wife, went up to them, offered them a few $100s. They took it, and she took the horse home. And Bernie worked the horse as he's a great horseman. And after some, I guess they had a couple of go-arounds, and I understand that Rodney Jenkins was also involved in some of the training, the early training of Snoopy. The horse could jump. You know, he was very brave. He got a little bit gangly, jumped. Bernie showed him, I think, as a young horse, at his third horse show, as a young horse, and I mean young, he was like 3 or 4 years old, he won the Grand Prix of Cleveland. It was his third horse show.
Wow.
And Harry Gill, who was Rodney's sponsor for years, bought the horse, and Rodney showed the horse, and Mr. Butler and my father had become good friends. And Mr. Butler, during the Piping Rock Horse Show on Long Island in the fall, would come to our house every morning for breakfast. And one day we were sitting having breakfast before the horse show, and he said, "Neal, who do you think is the best horse out there, the nicest young horse?" And I said, "Well, from what I can see, a horse called Snoopy that Rodney has." Okay, and that was all that was said. When we went back to Gladstone that year, there was Snoopy. Mr. Butler had bought him, and I wound up riding the horse. It was assigned to me to ride, and that's how that all started.
Was that arranged at the kitchen table?
No,
or
I had
came about?
I had no idea it happened till I got to Gladstone, and I looked on the board. We had a schedule, and I looked at the board the first morning there, and next to Snoopy's name was Neal, so I rode him.
So what was it like when you first rode him?
Well, he did have a mind of his own. He was probably a lot better, but he still could be difficult at times. He was a wonderful horse to ride. Had a great mouth, great balance, would jump anything.
So from the time you met Snoopy and started riding him, at what point you were in the Olympics in 1972? What is that timeline, or how does that timeline?
The year 1970 was when I started with him, and he was supposed to go to Europe as a young horse. Who knew how he would stack up and become, if he would ever become an Olympic horse, but that was my horse to ride. Except when we got to the airport and started loading the horses, several things happened at the airport, and Snoopy never made the trip to Europe that year. So he just got sent home and got turned out for the summer. And I started riding him again in the fall, and hopefully the team had made arrangements not to fly him to Europe in =71, but they sent him over by boat.
Was he more amenable to the boating?
Oh, he was fine for the boating. I was not, but he was fine. But I made the trip over with him, me and Peter, his groom. We made the trip over on the ship.
And in 1972, you were at the Olympics in Munich.
Yeah. Well, in '71, when we got there, Snoopy became a sensation. He would just, he would jump the fences, and he would be like feet over the top of these things, and people really noticed. And that year, I won. He also won the Grand Prix of Aachen that year, and 2 days before that, we actually, in the Nations Cup, he was my ride in the Nations Cup, and we tied the Germans and had to jump off, and we beat the Germans in '71. And then he won the Grand Prix of Aachen. He won the Horse and Hound in London that year. I'm trying to think what else. We had won a lot of classes that year, quite a few classes.
Was he a big horse?
He looked a lot bigger than he was. He had a big, long, swan-like neck. And if I remember correctly, he was like 16'2", 16'3". He wasn't a huge horse, but he looked like a big horse.
What do you feel gave him the ability to jump so phenomenally?
He was a thoroughbred.
Could you say that again?
He was a thoroughbred.
Is a thoroughbred your preferential
Absolutely.
ride?
To me, I've always said it, that the warm bloods are, there's a lot of really, really nice warm bloods, but not a lot of them have for me anyway, they're not as, riding most warm bloods to me is like driving a dump truck with no power steering and not power brakes, and riding a thoroughbred is like driving a Ferrari. You just kind of aim them and they go.
Do you feel that a thoroughbred can jump as high and as big as a warm blood?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it's proven. Years ago, all the U.S. had were thoroughbreds, and we went to Europe. Everybody wanted the thoroughbreds, and kind of a lot of the breeders in Europe, in Holland and in Germany, were coming over and buying mares, thoroughbred mares, to breed to the German horses and the Dutch horses. A lot of the pedigrees that you see today, there's a lot of thoroughbred in them. Yeah. You know, years back.
Were there physical traits that Snoopy possessed that gave him a competitive edge?
Nothing that I was really aware of. I just knew he could jump, and he was brave. Whatever you aimed him at, he would try it. You had to be a little bit crazy anyway to do it.
Him or you? No.
Both of us.
Did you ever get scared going down to gigantic fences?
No.
Never?
Never. You know, apprehension. You know, going down to a big wall or something. Yeah. You know. You think, oh, am I going to make it? But you went anyway. You said, whatever happens, happens. We really didn't care.
Yeah, that's the difference between you and I.
Okay.
So 1972, the Olympics with Snoopy. Tell us about that experience in Munich.
Well, there were several events that led up to it. In Aachen that year, Snoopy, the day of the Nations Cup, Snoopy we all woke up that morning, and he was not right. He was sick. Turned out that he had a very high fever. A German vet came in, and they were afraid he may founder, and one of the old-time remedies was to bleed the horse. I don't know if some of the old-timers would understand what that is, and what they would do is they would drain the horse's blood. They would take a large quantity, like gallons of blood, and they would put it, and they would inject it back into the muscle, and that was supposed to hopefully prevent the horse from foundering. Well, they did that, and the horse lost a lot of weight. We couldn't ship from Aachen. Well, we were on our way. Our last two horse shows before the Olympic Games were in France, and they delayed the travel a couple of days. And then after several weeks, Snoopy had recovered, and we were hoping to put on, you know, he lost a lot of weight, so we were trying to get him fit again.
Next time on Unbridled.
So in the individual, we wound up in a three-way tie for the gold medal. So we had to jump off, and by the third round, Snoopy was just tired.
That's next week on Unbridled with Susan Kayne.